The Imperial Knights, or Questor Imperialis in High Gothic, are piloted robotic combat walkers of small to medium size in the service of the Imperium and sometimes the Adeptus Mechanicus. Each knight is piloted by a single human warrior drawn from an ancient feudal aristocratic culture that stretches across the galaxy. However, a knight is smaller and less capable in combat than even the smallest class of true Titan utilized by the Collegia Titanica, the Warhound-class Scout Titan. Knights normally deploy in squadrons comprised of several of these war machines. These ancient battlesuits stand 30 to 40 Terran feet, 9 to 12 meters tall, are protected by nearly impenetrable ion shields, and armed with a devastating array of heavy weapons. Imperial Knights are colossal war machines that tower over the battlefield. They are propelled into battle by powerful servos and have the power to kick over tanks and crush soldiers into red paste. Vulnerable limbs and joints are protected by sweeping armor plates of adamantium and supported by an incorporated ion shield, which responds to the thought commands of its noble pilot. The presence of just one of these towering engines of destruction is enough to change the course of a battle, and only the titans of the Adeptus Mechanicus are more feared by the enemies of mankind. Knights are not mere war machines, but relics from a lost age, armored giants from a forgotten era. One does not drive such an heirloom. It must be bonded with. Only a noble from an ancestral knightly house may have such an honor. During a strange and terrible rite known as the Ritual of Becoming, the noble fuses their mind with the machine spirit of the knight, a union of flesh and metal. Only then can the noble truly occupy the throne mechanicum, the seat of control from which they use his mind to command the towering knight. Thousands of standard years before the rise of the Imperium, mankind reached out to the stars and settled many faraway worlds. Among the apparatus of colonization were formidable war machines known as knights, which existed to protect the settlers from any threat. The strongholds constructed from the remains of ancient Terran colony starships are ruled by the descendants of the first human settlers of those far-flung worlds, mighty fighters who go to war in their towering armored battlesuits and who are sworn to protect and guard the imperial citizens who now inhabit their worlds. These proud and haughty warriors can trace their bloodlines back to Terra itself and are colloquially known as nobles or scions in imperial society and as the Questoris Familia in formal High Gothic. Over the millennia, the pilots of these massive warsuits have established a rich culture, noble houses each sworn to the defense of their homeworld, bound by oaths of fealty to the Golden Throne of Terra and the Adeptus Mechanicus of Mars. Knight armor comes in a wide variety of forms, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. The two most commonly seen types are the Knight Paladin and the Knight Errant. These both use the same basic body form, but are fitted with different weapon arrays. Each is well liked for its balanced and deadly combination of maneuverability, protection, and firepower. All Imperial Knights are protected by thick adamantium armor and are fitted with powerful weapon systems. Usually, this entails two primary weapons, one attached to each of its arms, which will be supplemented by a number of secondary weapon systems fitted to its body and shoulders. The hand-forged armor that protects each knight was crafted long ago, and elements such as the individual armor plates, helm, or crests can therefore vary considerably depending on the skill of the artisan who made them. The armor is often lavishly detailed and adorned with complex heraldry that reveals the knight's allegiances and the deeds he has accomplished in battle. In addition to their weaponry, all knights carry potent defensive field generators called ion shields. This ancient technology works by projecting an energy field across a narrow arc to the front of the knight. By quickly moving the position of the shield so that it intercepts enemy attacks, a knight is able to survive even the heaviest fire, whilst still being able to fire its own weapons in return. The exact setting and positioning of the shield is essential, as the ion shield is only designed to deflect and slow shots, rather than absorb them in the manner of the far more powerful void shields used on Imperial Titans. This means the effectiveness of the shield is partially dependent on the skill and experience of its operator. Both the Knight Paladin and Knight Errant are traditionally equipped with enormous melee weapons and are famed for their skill with them, charging into the enemy and delivering blows left and right with their massive Reaper chainswords. This impressive close combat capability is supported with powerful ranged weapons that can blast apart enemy vehicles and heavy stubbers to mow down infantry targets. Other, much rarer types of knight armor are used on some knight worlds. Amongst the heaviest types of knight armor made by the Forge worlds are the Crusader and the Castellan. Although slower than other suit types, these two benefit from substantially increased firepower and much thicker armor, and are instead used in a fire support role. The Lancer is a faster version of a standard knight suit. These agile machines are used to outflank the enemy, scout out their defenses, and distract hostile forces while slower units get into position to attack. This type of armor is sophisticated and extremely difficult to manufacture, and its use is therefore usually reserved for rulers of knightly houses or for nobles that have proven themselves worthy of it in the fires of victory. However, while the Crusader, Castellan, and Lancer are rightly revered, the Paladin and Errant's perfectly balanced combination of speed, firepower, and armor make them the supreme examples of knight design. Long before the rise of the Emperor and the birth of the Imperium, during the age of technology, humanity reached out to the stars, eager to occupy new worlds and expand its burgeoning interstellar empire. Vast colonization starships carried eager human settlers, along with all the resources they might require, and landed on far-flung, often isolated worlds. The first Knight worlds were founded at the very start of the age of technology, when scouts from Terra traveled far through the galaxy, seeking planets to use as agricultural worlds to provide food for mankind's burgeoning population, or as mining colonies to provide the materials needed to fuel their expansion across the stars. Indeed, the Knight worlds had already been established for thousands of standard years when the Imperium was first founded in the 30th millennium. When those first human scout ships discovered a suitable planet for colonization, gigantic spacecraft were dispatched to settle them. These ships were part of Terra's Long March fleets, named after the duration of their voyage and their destination among the stars. The name was apt. Each of the Long March colony starships carried thousands of settlers on a solar decades-long journey to a far-distant planet. Upon arrival, the colony ship would land and be immediately cannibalized by the colonists to provide the raw materials needed for their first settlements. There was no hope of return to mankind's distant homeworld. The struggle for survival on many of these worlds was grim. On some, the settlers found themselves the prey of vicious predators or were attacked by native alien races, which saw the human settlers as invaders. On other worlds, extreme weather conditions or an unbreathable atmosphere made travel outside of domed habitat zones next to impossible. However, problems like these had been anticipated, and in order to deal with them, the settlers were supplied with standard template construct, STC databases, and fabrication facilities that allowed them to build powered suits of exo-armor. The pilots of these bipedal walking machines were protected by a hard shell of plasteel and armed with an array of military-grade heavy weapons. The suits proved invaluable. Few, if any, natural predators or hostile alien warriors could stand against them, and they could travel through even the most dangerous environment with ease. The towering armored figures soon became a common sight on the colonies, where they were known as Knights by the settlers, after the legendary armored warriors and protectors of ancient Terran history. Compelled by the mind-altering effects instilled by the Throne's Mechanicum, a control platform that allows a pilot to interface with their Knight battlesuit, over the course of a few generations, these elite warriors gradually developed a society that evolved into the knightly houses. The plasteel plates of the original exoskeleton suits were slowly replaced with more ornate armor made from adamantium, providing better protection as well as a panoply befitting the wearer's prestige and rank in his society. The more mundane duties that the knights had once taken part in on the colony worlds, logging with their mighty Reaper chainswords, for example, or blasting apart rock ore with their rapid-fire battle cannons, were delegated to those of lesser ranks, allowing the knights to focus on the arts of war and governorship. Dwelling in tall strongholds, the nobles strove to protect the lives of their subjects, as they now saw the settlers they protected, and to bring order to the primeval maelstrom on the planets that were their homes. The knightly houses proved to be highly successful at both of these things, and soon became a vital part of human society during the Age of Technology. Tragically, the Age of Technology was doomed to fall and devolve into a shadow of its former glory. Around the time of the 22nd millennium AD, mankind's vast galactic empire began to suffer a pandemic of terrible wars and massive invasions, caused, at least in part, by the emergence of the first human psychers and the widespread use of sentient machines remembered in human myth as the Men of Iron. By the 25th millennium, ferocious warp storms had largely isolated the widespread human colonies, and the era that came to be known as the Age of Strife had well and truly begun. During this lamentable era of human history, also sometimes referred to as Old Night, especially on Terra, interstellar travel to many of these human-settled worlds was made impossible due to the massive warp storms caused by the slow gestation of the foul chaos god Slaanesh in the days before the fall of the Eldari. Although vast swaths of the night worlds fell to the storm of death and destruction that defined the Age of Strife, some survived, aided considerably by the innate conservatism and resistance to change of the knightly houses. Where other planets welcomed psychers into their midst and reveled in the luxurious lifestyle that advanced thinking machines could provide, the knightly houses had largely shunned both, preferring to stick with the traditions and technology of the past. Thus, when the violence that presaged the Age of Strife struck, hundreds of night worlds were sidelined or ignored, and took little direct part in the terrible conflicts that tore the rest of humanity apart. Cut off and alone, the knightly houses were quickly forgotten by the other human colonies. Left to their own devices, the warrior aristocracy cemented their control and, encouraged by the psychological manipulations caused by the process of imprinting their suits of knight armor, almost all of them enforced neo-feudal systems on their homeworlds. During the latter years of this tumultuous age, the ancient Mechanicum of Mars began sending out many starships that made use of sublight drives to explore the galaxy in search of standard template construct, STC technologies, on lost human colony worlds. In the course of their travels, these slow-moving exploratory expeditions discovered large clusters of human-settled star systems that had once belonged to the ancient interstellar human civilization that had existed during the Age of Technology. But these worlds had regressed during the Age of Strife to become feudal worlds possessed of a pre-industrial feudal culture dominated by castes of warrior aristocrats. The societies that evolved were built upon concepts of fealty, honor, and duty, three things that all knights hold in the greatest regard. All of the nobles, or scions as they were sometimes known, on a night world owed their allegiance to a knightly house whose ruler could call upon them at any time to carry out his commands. Each house could also field large numbers of men-at-arms, either mounted or on foot. The houses also had groups of artificers and technicians who maintained the suits of knight armor as best they could, and over time became an integral part of society on all of the night worlds. Sometimes the ruler of a knightly house would come from the same family for generation after generation, but more often than not, the death of an incumbent ruler would lead to a period of political maneuvering or even outright warfare until a new monarch was selected. Competition between different knightly houses on a planet was just as intense, and although full-scale battles were rare, all strove to outdo their rivals in any way they could, be it in the field of politics, ancient traditions, or contests of their skill at arms. On the night world of Hygroxias, for example, once every 10 Terran years, the three major houses compete against each other in a series of trials known as the Honor Games, the winner of which rules the governing council for the next solar decade. As the Age of Strife stretched from standard centuries into millennia, the night worlds became increasingly insular and inward-looking. Each developed its own titles and terms, so that on one night world the ruler of a knightly house would be known as a lord, while on another they might be called a ritter or patriarch, and a noble stronghold could be known as their castle, fastness, or mansion. Without any outside contact, ritual and etiquette started to dominate daily life within the knightly houses, and the only escape from stultifying tradition lay in donning a suit of knight armor and taking to the field of battle. After 5,000 Terran years, the Imperium of mankind arose from the ruins of the Age of Strife. Under the guidance of the Emperor, humanity returned to the stars and began the Great Crusade to reunite mankind. Nothing was able to stand in the way of the resurgent Imperial armies, and soon human colonies on planets all across the galaxy were brought within the fold of the newly formed Imperium. When rogue trader Militant Jeffers rediscovered a night world, Crisis, for the first time, he quickly realized the knightly houses could be valuable allies for the Emperor's armies. In his reports, he pointed out the knights' many virtues and emphasized the world's value to the Imperium as a source of born and bred warriors. The administratum agreed with Jeffers's findings and set about finding the rest of the long-lost night worlds. Although there were thousands of night worlds at their height during the Age of Technology, the vast majority had been destroyed or died out during the Age of Strife. Now only several hundred survive, scattered all across the galaxy. Most of the night worlds share certain features, hallmarks of the instructions followed by the original settlers. The nobles themselves occupy sprawling walled strongholds, each a Gothic, ancient structure of dusty, lifeless halls and corridors. Many are built on the same location as the first human settlements on the planet and include at their core parts of the giant colony sublight starships used to transport the first settlers to their new worlds. They can vary in size from small keeps to entire cities bordered by vast outer walls. Huge farms or strip mines surround the strongholds, providing foodstuffs and raw materials for local use and export across the galaxy. The colony ship's purpose was always to generate resources for mankind. It is in these settlements that the vast majority of Imperial citizens on night worlds live, with few venturing more than a dozen kilometers from their place of birth. In addition to these settlements, vast grazing herds of beasts wander through the wildernesses between the strongholds. More often than not, these are huge reptilian creatures that were introduced to the planet as livestock in the Age of Technology. Packs of local predators will often pursue the grazing herds or attack the farms surrounding a stronghold, and it is the duty of the knights to fight to keep them at bay. Even on planets with less ferocious flora and fauna, the knights must be constantly vigilant in order to keep the herds and farms safe from alien raiders and rapacious pirates. Most knightly houses, though by no means all, are associated with an Adeptus Mechanicus Forge world, and in return for fighting alongside that Forge world's Titan legions, they gain access to advanced technology and knowledge that only the Adeptus Mechanicus possess. The association between the knightly houses and the Adeptus Mechanicus dates back to the time of the Great Crusade. When the night worlds were first discovered, the different imperial organizations that made up the Great Crusade competed ferociously with each other to gain control of the valuable resource the knights represented. This Machiavellian political contest went on for solar decades until the Mechanicum of Mars was finally able to establish their dominance in the right to exploit the night worlds. The Mechanicum were driven in this by a desire to gain control of the archaeotech that could be found in abundance on the ancient night worlds, but were also aware that the vast natural resources and military might of the knightly houses could make them a valuable asset. To this end, once they had established their right to exploit the night worlds, they set about making them dependent upon the Mechanicum for their continued survival. At the time of the Great Crusade, the tech priests' space fleets found an anarchic galaxy where the ancient civilization of interdependent human planets no longer existed. The surviving night worlds that were discovered had not retained all of their old technology and had devolved into feudal states ruled by aristocrats, the nobles or scions of their elite dynasties. The tech priests settled amongst these feudal empires, founding many forge worlds and established contacts with the knightly houses, trading with their worlds and investigating the ancient ruins where surviving technology could still sometimes be found. The ferocious warrior knights proved invaluable in combating enemies such as marauding orcs and land-hungry Eldari exodites. In return, the tech priests promised technical expertise and helped the nobles to rebuild their planets to the imperial standard of technology. The most important thing that the tech priests brought to the Night Worlds was the knowledge and technology needed to maintain the nobles' suits of battle armor. Over the course of the Age of Strife, much of the expertise needed to keep the complex knight armor working had been lost. Local technicians and artificers did their best to maintain the suits, but in many cases they simply did not have the necessary technical ability. When the Night Worlds were rediscovered, most had only a handful of operational suits remaining, and even these were in a poor state of repair. The Mechanicum promised to remedy this situation by inducting the local technicians that had been caring for the armor into the Cult Mechanicus, teaching them the skills they needed to keep the knight armor in good repair. Because of this, nearly all suits of knight armor now bear the mark of the Cult Mechanicus as a reminder of the debt of gratitude they owe to Mars. Over the millennia, the Forge Worlds have grown powerful, with the Night Worlds flourishing alongside them. Year-long, the knights battle and patrol until the great cargo ships arrive from a Forge World, bringing new knight suits, weapons, tools, and mining machinery. They leave with their holds packed with ores and food. The tech priests and the knights are now mutually dependent, and many Forge Worlds form the hub of a tiny empire consisting of a Forge World and its surrounding Night Worlds. In return, the knights have gained much from the tech priests, their worlds gradually returning to being technically sophisticated cultures. However, the relationship between Forge World and Night World is not always an easy one, and nowhere is this more true than in the fraught relationship that exists between the nobles who pilot the knights and the sacristans trained by the Adeptus Mechanicus to maintain their armor. The golden age of the Great Crusade was to be cut short by the supreme act of betrayal known as the Horus Heresy, during which the galaxy was gripped by the most bitter civil war humanity had ever seen. Across the nascent Imperium, rebels clashed with loyalists for the fate of mankind. Space Marines fought Space Marines, Titans fought Titans, and alongside them, Imperial Knights fought Imperial Knights. In those dark days, nobody was to be trusted, and treachery was as much a part of warfare as bolter shells, volcano cannons, and drop pods. One of the most horrific betrayals of that great civil war occurred during the infamous Battle of Molech. As the War Master Horus led his armies to Terra, he left a trail of destruction in his wake, hundreds of light years wide. His forces seemed unstoppable as garrison after garrison fell before his might, or changed allegiance and sided with the traitorous commander. It was on the planet of Molech that one of the most determined stands was to be made. Loyalist Titan legions and over 100 Imperial army regiments and knightly houses stood ready to bear the brunt of the War Master's attack in an attempt to halt his inexorable advance. When it came, it was like a hurricane unleashed upon the verdant world. Horus's initial assault devastated many cities and strongholds, and amongst the victims were Molech's rulers, House Divine. Dispossessed and unable to fight back, the knightly house slowly succumbed to the temptations of chaos. Over the following solar months, the insidious whisper of Slaanesh, Dark Prince of Chaos and God of Indulgence and Excess, spread through their depleted ranks. Their officers became lethargic, interested only in their sports, using their mighty night suits to hunt the towering reptilian beasts that stalked Molech's lush jungles. The seductive grip of Slaanesh grew stronger, as the Prince of Pleasure bent the force of its will to corrupting the noble divines. Soon they met in secret cabals, performing depraved rites and ceremonies within the heart of the loyalist camp. No act was too shameful or disgusting. The sensations of the moment became their only desire. When Horus launched a massive offensive, the Knights of House Divine committed an act of brazen treachery and turned on the troops who remained loyal to the Emperor. The Imperial forces found themselves caught in a trap, with advancing traitor Titans to the front and Chaos Knights attacking their ranks from behind. This treachery allowed the Chaos host to punch through the Imperial defenses, leaving them with no line of retreat. They were totally defeated, so brutally that only 1 in 100 of the troops of the Imperial army survived the campaign. Since that first betrayal, only a handful of knightly houses have been corrupted by chaos, even when the Forge worlds to which they owed fealty became part of the Dark Mechanicum. For millennia, the Imperial Knights have woven tales of heroism and chivalry across the stars. They have been the shield and the sword, defending humanity and slaying the monsters that would threaten its reign. Though the darkness has closed in around them time and again, always the Knights drive it back, lighting the void with their courage and valor. The history of the Knights is the tale of mankind, from that race's birth upon the world of Terra to its dominion of the stars beyond. Since their creation, the Knights have left an indelible footprint upon each era of mankind's development. There are many hundreds of Knight worlds scattered throughout the vast empire of mankind. The bold explorers of humanity's first expansion traveled far and wide into the galactic wilderness, seeking habitable worlds or planets that could otherwise be terraformed to sustain human life. Many of these exploratory fleets were equipped with Knight STC technology, enabling them to protect the colonies they established. More than 15 Terran millennia after their ancient ancestors set out into the stars, the distant descendants of these colonists dwell still on Knight worlds across the Imperium. Though many knightly houses have risen and fallen over the ages, those that remain can trace their heritage back to a time before the birth of the Imperium and are justifiably proud of their ancestry. Thus is every Knight world heavy with the weight of the past, regardless of its galactic location or level of technological advancement. The knightly houses found on each of the Knight worlds are affiliated broadly with either the Imperium of Man as one of the Questor Imperialis, or more directly with the Adeptus Mechanicus as one of the Questor Mechanicus. The Knight worlds aligned with the Imperium are expected to adhere to the Imperial Tithe, as does any other planet, but still trade with the Adeptus Mechanicus to keep their Knight suits operational. The Knight worlds with direct ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus are often found near to the parent Forge world with which they are associated. This is no mere coincidence, for many of these Forge worlds were specifically founded near to already extant Knight worlds in order to harvest their natural resources. The Titan legions that set forth from these Forge worlds to battle the enemies of mankind often do so in the company of their allies from the Knight worlds. A partnership between both Forge and Knight world is mutually advantageous to both factions, their military strength great enough to shatter cities and conquer worlds. The descendants of the early human pioneers who settled their respective worlds were found in the knightly houses of the Imperial Knights. Known formerly in High Gothic as the Questoris Familia, these dynasties of imperial nobility evolved from the need to protect the early human settlers of the Knight worlds from indigenous species discovered on their alien planets. When the original settlers arrived on distant worlds, they cannibalized their sublight colony spacecraft, using the parts for the raw materials of survival. The Imperial Knights now dwell in massive strongholds, foreboding martial structures, the heart of which contains advanced technologies taken from these ancient colonization vessels. The formal functionary roles of Protector and Castellan present on many of these worlds developed over time into the structure of the noble houses that was old when the Imperium of Man was in its infancy. The curious fact that the knightly houses are often uncannily alike in culture and structure, despite their far-flung nature, is explained, at least in part, by the union of noble pilot and their suit of knight armor, known as the Ritual of Becoming. Connecting at a neural level with the war spirit, artificial intelligence, of a suit of knight armor has a profound effect on the consciousness of the pilot. The joining of human mind and war spirit has helped to create cultures which appear uncannily similar across the galaxy, despite evolving on worlds that are far apart, possess entirely different environments, and have never shared formal communication. The Imperial Knights are characterized by their independence. They are bound to the Imperium, and in many cases to the Adeptus Mechanicus by oaths of fealty, but they are not subjects in any true sense of the word. Their culture and society predates the Imperium by thousands of Terran years, way back before even the age of technology began in many cases, and it is informed far more by the bonds between a noble pilot and their knight suit than any outside influence. Theirs is a culture of relentless formalized ritual. It is a society that exists around a stultifying observance to apparently pointless ceremony and endless courtly mundanity. Against this tableau of formalized ritual are the Knight Pilots. They are a breed of warriors who find their only joy in battle, and they yearn constantly to escape the oppressive dullness of courtly life and ride their knight suits to war. The thrill of battle and the risk of death is an infinitely preferable experience for them to the monotony of life within their fortresses. These are warriors born to their calling and raised for nothing other than war. They spend every moment they can preparing, training, and planning for battle. The alternative is simply too dull for them to even contemplate. Since the dark days of the Horus Heresy, the Night Worlds have continued to establish themselves as an important and loyal part of the Imperium. Feared in battle and almost unswayable once they have given their word, they are welcomed as powerful allies by Imperial commanders whenever their services are available. It is only the relative scarcity of the surviving Night Worlds and the rigid, hidebound society they have developed that limits the impact the Imperial Knights have on the galaxy. Daily life within the Knight strongholds is bound by ancient traditions and rituals that can date back, unchanged, more than 10,000 standard years, and which the Imperial Knights feel themselves honor-bound to adhere to. This immense awareness of tradition manifests itself in rituals that can dominate and suffocate all other aspects of life within the stronghold. Days are almost wholly consumed tending to the obscure and esoteric tenets of tradition, and with honoring household traditions or important ancestors from thousands of standard years ago. For example, in House Habsburg, at the dawn of every day, the entire court must gather to hear the reading of the names and deeds of every ruler of the house, dating back to its foundation millennia before. There are hundreds of names, and the process takes up most of the local day. The only escape from the smothering ennui of courtly life lies in conflict. Both the heroic challenge of the field of battle as an Imperial Knight, and the more ignoble but no less enthralling political contests that take place between the knightly houses. The first of these is solely the preserve of the first or second sons of the aristocracy, for only they are allowed to pilot suits of knight armor. It is difficult to imagine the sheer freedom and sense of power that donning a suit of knight armor brings to its wearer. At court, the noble's every move and action is dictated by ancient traditions and rigid social rules. Once the armor is donned, all that is forgotten. They are free to act as they see fit, unconstrained by anything but their own moral compass. This being the case, it comes as no surprise that Imperial Knights fight with such ruthless and joyful ferocity, or that they are willing to endlessly practice the techniques of battle such that their prowess is only matched by the Adeptus Astartes. When unable to justify wearing their armor for training or battle, nobles organize contests between themselves to prove who is the bravest and most skilled, and in truth, they are only truly content when arrayed for battle and piloting their armor. However, there is also a darker side to the character of the Imperial Knights, one which drives another form of behavior that allows for an escape from the traditions and rituals of courtly life. The same mental conditioning wrought through their neural link to their throne's mechanicum that imposes a strong respect for hierarchy and fealty upon the nobles has the side effect of making them endlessly ambitious. In short, they are all compelled to outdo their peers and be acknowledged as the mightiest of all. In part, this drives the nobles' obsession with contests of skill, but it also reveals itself in an equally intense obsession with political intrigue. The courts of the knightly houses are riven with political factions, each trying to outdo the others in any way possible. These political intrigues are not the sole purview of the nobles themselves. All nobles have a high-born consort, it being considered vital that the noble has sons to inherit their name and titles, and daughters to marry as consorts to other knightly families in order to cement political alliances. A noble's consort can have considerable influence, and political intrigue offers them just about their only escape from the drudgery of courtly life. Many a noble has risen to high power thanks to the intelligence, cunning, and ruthless ambition of his consort, while the noble himself has found his pleasures on the field of battle. The result is that plots and schemes abound among the highest ranks of a Night World society. Often these will be inconsequential and only result in one faction or another gaining prestige over their rivals. But at times, such as when the ruler of a knightly house dies, they can become deadly serious. It is not unknown for factions to come to blows or even to arrange the assassination of a particularly hated opponent. Most infamously, on the planet Patronus, a dispute about which rituals should be carried out when members of the different houses visited each other escalated into a centuries-long conflict that devastated the planet and eventually led to the demise of both houses. When mankind rediscovered the feudal domains of the Night Houses, they quickly found common cause, exchanging oaths of loyalty. The knightly houses found on each of the Night Worlds are affiliated with either the Imperium generally, or serve as direct vassals of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Night Worlds of the Questor Imperialis are expected to adhere to the Imperial tithe, as does any other planet, but still trade with the Adeptus Mechanicus to keep their night suits operational. Many Night Houses see the Imperium as their equal partner and support it militarily out of mutual advantage. Although these houses trade openly with the Imperium and march to war alongside their armies, they retain a fierce independence. Other houses found common cause specifically with the ancient Mechanicum, who in turn courted the Night Houses with unseemly eagerness. These Questor Mechanicus houses, as they are now known, have forged alliances of reciprocal protection and betterment. The Night Worlds of the Questor Mechanicus are often found near to the parent Forge World with which they are associated. This is no mere coincidence, for many of these Forge Worlds were specifically founded near to Night Worlds in order to harvest their natural resources. The Titan legions that set forth from these Forge Worlds to battle the enemies of mankind often do so in the company of their allies from the Night Worlds. A partnership between both Forge and Night World is mutually advantageous to both factions, as their combined military strength is great enough to shatter cities and conquer worlds. Those who look at the fealty of the knightly houses towards the Adeptus Mechanicus often wonder at whether the relationship is not in fact based on jealousy, for the tech priests of Mars covet the pre-imperial technology that lies within the mighty citadels of each Night House. For their part, the Questor Mechanicus houses seem not to care, since they receive the full resources of the affiliated Forge Worlds from their allies. While the overwhelming majority of Imperial Knights belong to houses, such as Houses Terran, Hawkshroud, and Cadmus, who are aligned to the Imperium, some houses, such as Tyrannus and Raven, are sworn to the service of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Each house has its own proud traditions that span thousands of standard years and will have fought in countless battles on behalf of humanity. Some knights, for one reason or another, forsake the succor of a noble house. These knights owe no allegiance to any house and forge their own destiny as Freeblade Knights or Freeblades. The ancient tradition of the Freeblade harkens back over 10 standard millennia ago, during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy eras. Known as legendary Freeblades, these were scions of that time who were drawn out from the ranks of their former households, either willingly owing to the lure of adventure or the unquenchable lust for battle, or unwillingly as outcast renegade or last survivor. These Freeblades were knights mendicant, owing no alliance and no fealty. Of these, many were drawn to the Great Crusade, lured by the thirst for glory or the unceasing clamor of war on the frontier, joining the Questoris Knight Great Crusade forces and fighting on countless worlds in support of the Emperor's great work. Since that bygone era, the tradition has continued to be upheld by the knightly houses of the Questoris Familia. Ancient tradition ensures that every noble pilot has the right to leave their knightly house and strike out on their own. These Freeblade Knights are tragic heroes, driven to leave their houses to pursue a cause of their own, continuing to fight for mankind, but call no man master. The reasons that a knight becomes a Freeblade are many and varied. In some cases, they simply cannot bear the idea of returning to the crushing rituals of the court and instead set off alone, rarely removing their suits of armor and living only for battle. Other Freeblade Knights have made a personal oath or pact to carry out a certain task that requires they travel across the galaxy in order to fulfill it. Most commonly, though, a Freeblade Knight is simply the last surviving member of their house, left without a liege lord and with no option but to travel across the galaxy until they find a new master or die in the attempt. In all these cases, and many more, a Freeblade Knight is no longer a member of the house they once belonged to. If they are the last surviving member of the house, they may retain their former heraldry as a mark of respect, but usually a Freeblade will change the color of their armor and the markings upon it and take on a new name to mark the change in their status. The names of some Freeblades, such as the Knight of Dark Shadows, who fought in the Reign of Blood, and Retribution Incarnate, who traveled alongside the Lord Commander Solar Macarius during his conquests, are revered as dedicated warriors that would never admit defeat, no matter what odds were arrayed against them. Freeblades either set out on their own, wandering the stars in search of a worthy cause, or else they settle in further isolation, offering their protection to those who need it. They tend to travel alone or with a small group of retainers and sacristans, but sometimes circumstances will result in small groups of Freeblades banding together, fighting in much the same manner as a household detachment, but with a bond forged in battle rather than inherited through blood. Not belonging to a knight house does nothing to reduce the effect of a Freeblade's psychological conditioning. Freeblade Knights still place great significance on acts of honor and duty, perhaps even more so than before. Once they have given their word or set their mind on a task, they will follow it through, come what may, even at the cost of their own lives. They also feel it is their responsibility to protect those that are unable to protect themselves and to punish those that prey on the weak. They carry out such tasks with a brutal efficiency, leaving only death in their wake and then moving on. This has meant that the Freeblade Knights have gained an almost legendary reputation amongst the ordinary citizens of the Imperium. Such glory, however, means nothing to these lonely, battle-hardened warriors. They are not interested in either praise or reward from those they defend, and their only comforts are found in their long, endless journey and the hot adrenaline rush of battle. The war machines utilized by the Imperial Knights were originally built with the intention of helping with the work of human interstellar colonization. That inherent practicality was communicated in many of the aspects of their current design. For example, the Reaper Chainsword, considered such a fearsome weapon on the battlefield, was clearly once intended for clearing huge areas of vegetation for the early settlers. Each of the weapons has heavy-duty lifting hooks attached to it, and one can imagine the original practical colonists hooking up digging or lifting apparatus just as easily as they could remove a powerful battle cannon out of stores to fend off marauding orcs or Eldari. Many of the practical elements of the original endoskeleton of the Knights' war machines are now hidden under the sloped armor plates and heraldry of the Imperial Knight. If one were able to penetrate beneath the heavy layers of thick protective armor plates, the war machine would resemble the functional STC construction machines of the past, when the colonists first used them to defend their early settlements. Knight armor comes in a wide variety of forms, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. There are 3 broader classes of knights, ranging from lightest and smallest to largest and heaviest. These include the Armiger Pattern Knights, Questoris Pattern Knights, and Dominus Pattern Knights. The 2 most commonly seen classes within these patterns are both Questoris Knights, including the Knight Paladin and the Knight Errant. These both use the same basic body form, but are fitted with different weapon arrays. Each is well liked for its balanced and deadly combination of maneuverability, protection, and firepower. All Imperial Knights are protected by thick adamantium armor and are fitted with powerful weapon systems. Usually, this entails 2 primary weapons, one attached to each of its arms, which will be supplemented by a number of secondary weapon systems fitted to its torso and shoulders. The hand-forged armor that protects each knight was crafted long ago, and elements such as the individual armor plates, helm, or crests can therefore vary considerably depending on the skill of the artisan who made them. The armor is often lavishly detailed and adorned with complex heraldry that reveals the knight's allegiances and the deeds he has accomplished in battle. Suits of knight armor are similar to Titans, in that they are controlled through neural interface sockets surgically inserted into the noble pilot's cerebrum and cerebellum. The pilot sits in a control platform called a throne mechanicum, where umbilical interface cords are attached to their neural sockets. The throne mechanicum is then, in turn, plugged into the suit of knight armor, allowing the noble to control its movements as if it were part of their own body and to receive sensory feedback from the suit so that they can see what it sees and feel what it feels. This interface allows an Imperial Knight to move with a fluid grace that can only be matched by the war machines of the craft world Eldari. Additionally, every knight possesses manual controls, which include dials and switches, a throttle lever for the right hand, and a fire control stick for the left. If the knight makes use of a melee weapon, its control stick lies just ahead and to the right of the throttle. These controls exist mostly for the use of the knight's sacristans and are intended to allow these technicians to position the suit in maintenance bays, run simulations, or to move it over short distances. The reality is that these manual controls allow for only rudimentary and clumsy movements, and as such are far inferior to the use of the throne mechanicum. However, if a noble was ever rendered thought dead, a term for the termination of the mental connection between the noble and their knight's throne mechanicum, they could rely in such an emergency on their manual controls. While their knight would become slow and stilted, more like an Astra Militarum sentinel walker than a true fusion of human consciousness and archaeotech, manual control might be enough to save the pilot's life. At the heart of every knightly stronghold is a single massive building known simply as the Sanctuary. It is here that the suits of knight armor are stored when not in use, and where the nobles undergo the ancient rituals and procedures that allow them to bond with their throne's mechanicum. These sanctuaries are incredibly ancient structures, built when the original sublight human colony ships first landed on the night worlds during the Age of Technology. The essential functions of the sanctuaries also originate from that time, though the changes and modifications made to the equipment over the millennia mean it would be unrecognizable to those that first installed it. It is in the sanctuary that young nobles undergo the bonding process that imprints their personality into a throne mechanicum in a procedure known as the Ritual of Becoming. This process takes place in a special room known as the Chamber of Echoes. The imprinting process is a lengthy, sometimes dangerous business. It has become a rite of passage for young nobles, the process of leaving behind their childhood once and for all. When he is old enough, a son of the household who is designated to become a noble is fitted with the sacred neural sockets and then undertakes a vigil, remaining seated in the throne mechanicum that has been assigned to him throughout a long night in the Chamber of Echoes. The nature of this ordeal and the inherent dangers associated with the neural interfacing process mean that more than a tenth of all supplicants are either driven mad by the process or suffer fatal aneurysms brought about by neurological feedback. Assuming it is successful, the imprinting process has two important side effects. Firstly, the imprint tends to exaggerate dominant aspects of the young noble's personality, especially with regard to the emotions he is feeling during his vigil. If he is scared, the imprint on the throne mechanicum will always be of a nervous tendency, making the suit difficult to control in combat. If the noble is angry with someone, the imprint will always loathe that person, even if the noble himself has long since forgiven or forgotten them. When a noble dies, his throne mechanicum retains some of his character and personality, and these ghosts whisper to each supplicant through the long vigil in the Chamber of Echoes. However, in addition to imprinting the noble's personality upon the throne mechanicum, the mind-link technology directly affects the personality of the noble himself. It does this by implanting strong positive associations to notions of fealty, obligation, and hierarchy, as well as a deep respect for the noble's ancestors. Exactly why and how these things are made to happen is something of a mystery, but it seems most likely that the mind-altering feedback routines were intentionally included by the device's original designers to limit the potential of a noble to go rogue and turn on the people he was meant to protect. Once a throne mechanicum has been imprinted, it is stored in the Communion Dome, which lies atop each sanctuary. This chamber is large and circular, with walls that are lined with all the thrones mechanicum of the household's nobles. When a noble wishes to interface with his suit of knight armor, he sits upon his throne and instigates the protocols of joining. Umbilical cords attach themselves to the noble's neural sockets, and then a section of wall behind the throne yawns open. The throne mechanicum slides backwards and descends from the communion dome through a series of transport tunnels before finally sliding into the waiting cockpit of the noble's suit of knight armor. This final step in the process takes place in a massive hangar known as the Vault Transcendent, which forms the ground floor of the sanctuary. This huge hall is large enough to hold all of the stronghold's knights. As soon as noble, throne, and knight armor are united, the three become as one, and the Imperial Knight powers up into life. Vast doors open in the outer walls of the sanctuary, and the knight strides forth to battle. When the Titan legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus march to war, contingents from the Night Worlds march beside them, and knightly houses will also send detachments of knights to fight alongside other allies when they feel it is their duty or obligation to do so. Traditionally, each knightly house sends one or more detachments of household knights to fight when a Titan legion musters for war. The exact number of knights in a household detachment varies considerably. When the call to arms is made, the representatives of the Forge world where the Titan Legion is based will request that each house provide a certain number of knights. Knightly houses are honor-bound to obey such summons and will only fail to comply in the most dire of circumstances. Forfeiting such a commitment is a source of great shame and unlikely ever to be forgotten, either by the house itself or their peers and rivals. Because of this, it is almost always the case that the full quota of Imperial Knights appear at the rallying point designated by the tech priests, ready to be transported away to join the Titan Legion. Arriving at the war zone, the eager knights will quickly be hurled into battle. Usually they are either tasked with fighting directly in support of the Legio's larger battle titans, or operating independently as fast-moving scouts and protecting the flanks of the Legio's slower-moving war machines. For almost all Imperial Knights, the call to fight as part of a Titan Legion is met with a burning enthusiasm. Knights from different household detachments vie with one another in acts of valor and heroism on the battlefield, as well as through the spectacle of the banners and individual heraldry emblazoned on their suits. The chance to earn glory while at the same time escaping courtly life, not just for solar days, but for standard years or even solar decades, is considered the greatest reward they are ever likely to receive. Occasionally, the Adeptus Mechanicus will decree that a household detachment must remain with the Titan Legion permanently. When this is the case, the nobles will change their vows of allegiance and heraldry from their house to the Titan Legion they now serve, and will be given an honorific title by the Master of the Legio to better reflect their new status. Knightly houses will also fight alongside Astra Militarum, Space Marine, and other Imperial forces whenever they feel it is their duty to do so. Sometimes this will be in return for help they received when defending their homeworld against alien invasion, as in the example seen in 456. M38. The 832nd Lord of House Hawkshroud received aid against Drukhari raiding parties from the Mordian Iron Guard. The Mordian troops, under the command of Colonel Vargriff, helped defend the Hawkshroud stronghold against the Drukhari, foiling an attempt to kidnap Lord Hawkshroud's consort in the process. Since that day, the Hawkshrouds feel honor-bound to provide aid to any descendants of the Vargriff line, should they be called upon to do so. Knightly houses also send household detachments to take part in off-world campaigns if they feel that their honor has been impinged in some way. Knights are proud warriors and cannot stand to let any slight be ignored, as many an aggressor has found to their cost. It is not unheard of for a knightly house to hunt down and destroy an enemy that has invaded their homeworld, or for a house to send household detachments to help their allies defeat a hated enemy. This was something that the Tau commander Shadowsun discovered when her emissaries so infuriated the ruler of House Terran with their veiled threats and overbearing attitude that he led several household detachments of his knights to help the imperial defenders of Agrellan. Although Agrellan was eventually overrun, the Imperial Knights proved a formidable opponent for the Tau Empire, forcing Commander Shadowsun to deploy the newly designed Ectianth 104 Riptide battlesuit to help counter them. Unfortunately for Shadowsun, the defeat on Agrellan has only deepened High King Tybalt's loathing for the Tau, and he has decreed that the honor of his house will not be satisfied until the upstart Xenos invaders have been driven back across the Damocles Gulf. Every Imperial Knight is a precious and valued war machine, revered by its noble pilot and painstakingly maintained by the house sacristans responsible for its upkeep. Each is painted in the glorious heraldry of its house and decorated with imagery and iconography that tell of its homeworld oaths and battle honors. The knight houses use an elaborate system of heraldry, signifying their allegiance and the house to which they belong. Knights will use some variation of their house's heraldry as their livery, incorporating its themes and motifs, but no two liveries can be identical. All knights bear striking, colorful liveries and often adorn their war machines with heraldic pennants. It is customary for the knights to compete not only in combat feats, but also in the appearance of their war mounts. Each symbol on an Imperial Knight has a powerful resonance for its wearer and a deep inner meaning. Most knights carry a variety of pennants and banners, proudly proclaiming their heritage and battle honors. These flags are flown from carapaces and weapons, but most commonly hang from the pinions that drive the war machine's powerful legs. Although the houses remained independent and isolated from the rest of mankind for millennia after the settlement of their homeworlds, their banners became more standardized when the nobles bent their knee to the Emperor of Mankind or the Adeptus Mechanicus in his stead. To this end, the banners of both Questor Imperialis and Questor Mechanicus Knights are broadly similar. The general format of a house banner has the house crest in its full form in the upper half of the pennant. All knights from a single house will carry this identical sigil. The lower portion of the banner is devoted to kill, honor, and campaign markings. These will differ from individual to individual, depending on where they have served and what honors they have gained. The exact layout and composition of these honors also varies from house to house. Some knight houses prefer a relatively simple arrangement of these markings with colored fields behind the icons, while others may favor a more complex array of icons and markings. The kill campaign and honor badges are a mix of local iconography, perhaps unique to a house, and sigils used by the armies of the Imperium. For example, if a knight serves in an Imperial campaign, his banners would display the official badge for that action, and this sigil would also be worn by any Space Marines or Imperial Guardsmen involved. The banners belonging to Freeblade Knights exemplify their individualism. They often echo the livery the pilots choose to apply over the top of their old house colors. Mottos are not uncommon, or alternative versions of the icons of these outcasts choose to identify themselves by. Such designs often reflect the fatalistic approach of the pilots, with skulls and other memento mori represented in great number. The pride of the nobles who pilot the Great Knight units is such that they will take any opportunity to proclaim their loyalties and achievements. To this end, they often decorate the rear side of their banners. Though less visible, these spaces are used for catechisms, rolls of honor, and lists of revered ancestors. The knight houses trace their origins to a period thousands of standard years before the birth of the Imperium of Man, so their banners present a visual language that appears to have evolved through time. Each began as a simple device, such as the White Horse of House Terran. Over the millennia, new alliances and significant events caused it to evolve into something grander, reflecting the complex relationship between the Knight House and the Imperium itself. The White Horse is symbolically linked to a vision that the House founder had way back in its distant past. Over the millennia, more heraldry, such as the helm above the crest and the swords behind, were added, symbolic of an ancient battle, as was the house name. Later, when Suetonius Terran swore allegiance to the Imperium, The crest was marshaled, with the half aquila falling on the right side and resplendent eagle wings as supporters. This half and half shows the observer the relationship between the knightly house and the Imperium, and the dichotomy of loyalty to their house and the wider Imperium. Other forms of Knight House heraldry, such as the house banner of House Griffith, possess subtle nods to events in their long, glorious history in the crest and secondary devices they employ. These are often very grand, with a mythological aspect to whatever symbols are chosen. House Griffith has fought wars against dragons during its ancient history, and as such, wear dragons as their crest. This desperate struggle served to harden the nobles into skilled and fierce warriors. Millennia later, House Griffith is sworn to the Imperium and has earned a reputation for producing some of the most formidable warriors ever to sit upon the throne mechanicum. The heraldry of House Griffith is halved with a dragon motif, connecting to their ancient history, and a red-winged aquila, professing loyalty to Terra. What truth lies behind the dragon symbol is now the subject of legend as much as historical fact, but to the warriors of House Griffith, it is very important. Essentially, the same is true of the Questor Mechanicus houses. Their imagery tends more towards the industrial, with harder edges to their designs, where tools replace the swords and axes displayed by other houses. In the place of Imperial Aquilas, these Imperial Knights wear the half-cog of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The same dual split remains here, with loyalty divided between the house and the machine cult. A perfect example is the crest of House Raven, foremost among the knightly houses aligned to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Their ancient alliance was brought about when a lord of House Raven witnessed the magi of Forge World Metallica roused to life knight suits that had lain inoperable for centuries. The seat of House Raven's power is their indomitable fortress known as the Keep Inviolate, a foreboding structure on the night world of Colossi. The full house crest of Raven bears homage to their heritage with the dual image of the Keep Inviolate and the Opus Machina. Finally, each Imperial Knight has the right to wear his own personal heraldry. Those of Imperial-aligned houses wear this on their front right shoulder plate of their knight. The form it takes is a matter of personal choice, although different houses have their own traditions. Adeptus Mechanicus-aligned houses do not typically bother with this at all. The nobles from houses such as Crast and Raven are willingly subsumed and do not fear for their independence. During the Horus Heresy, the galaxy was engulfed in the fiercest civil war mankind has ever known. Those who remained loyal to the Emperor fought against their erstwhile brothers as the War Master Horus made his bid for power. In those days, bonds of brotherhood were shattered and mistrust was common, treachery becoming as much a weapon as bolters and battle cannons. The Imperial Knights that did turn to chaos have long since died, but their souls live on as demons, floating within the shells of their corrupted war machines. The Chaos Knights themselves have also mutated, sprouting claws, tails, and other horrendous natural weapons as blessings of the dark gods. When the war machines of a night house dedicated to the ruinous powers marches onto the battlefield, it spreads havoc, despair, and death. When the heresy finally ended, these renegade night houses, known in High Gothic as the Questor Traitoris, presumably fled into the Eye of Terror alongside the rest of the forces of chaos, and remain active to this day, now twisted and changed by the mutating power of the warp. When a demonic legion marches to war, it is sometimes preceded by these Chaos Knights, spreading havoc and despair. In general, though, the innate conservatism of the knightly houses has made them resistant to the lures of the Chaos Gods, and renegade knights are therefore a rare sight on the battlefields of the late 41st millennium. Imperial records are somewhat lacking in their information referring to the knights in general, and this is only more true in regard to those renegade nobles of the night worlds who have embraced the fickle blessings of the Chaos Gods. Almost all knowledge of these traitors comes from records concerning those of the knights that have dedicated themselves to Slaanesh, and virtually nothing is known of those in service to the other Chaos Gods, or of those worshipping Chaos undivided as a singular entity. Since the first betrayal during the Battle of Molech by House Divine, many knight households have been corrupted by chaos down the millennia. Their crews have long since died, but their souls live on as demons, floating within the shells of their war machines. The renegade knights themselves have also mutated, sprouting claws, tails, and other horrendous weapons. When a Slaanesh army marches to war, it is preceded by these demon knights, spreading havoc and despair. The demon knights of Slaanesh are the first element of an advancing Slaaneshi army, preceding the bulk of chaos forces and chaos titans. Their task is to seek out the enemy, probe defenses, and attempt to flush them out of fortified positions. The knights' chief advantage is their speed and agility, allowing them to easily outflank any enemy and to run down and exterminate any stragglers. Slaaneshi demon knights do not use shock lances or power lances, as these weapons do not suit their style of combat. Akin to the Chaos Titans of Slaanesh and the Eldar Titans that they emulate, the demon knights are exceptionally nimble and agile, and they prefer to ambush their enemies and fight from afar, rather than charge headlong into close-quarters melee. These demon knights also do not utilize ion shields. Instead, they are surrounded by a glittering wall of energy created by the warp interface within them, which anchors the demonic spirit inside in the material realm. This shifting, swirling aura is called the Glamour of Slaanesh, and makes the demon knight very hard to target accurately. In effect, it works like an Aeldari holofield, and is yet another emulation of that Xenos race's titans. Like the holofield, the Glamour of Slaanesh proves useless against barrages and other attacks spread over a wide area, as such weapons do not rely on pinpoint accuracy. Additionally, since the Glamour of Slaanesh is an interface with the Imperium, it also provides a measure of protection against attacks drawing upon the warp, such as vortex missiles or psychic powers.